Welcome everyone to our very first edition of Food for Thought, which is our backlaid way of changing the world and changing Mexico to begin with. Everyone is sick of all the Zoom conversations, and we're not looking for the right answer. We're just looking for triggers to start moving ahead. So we have a very interesting guest today, and in this occasion, we have Nydia, we have Bob Gower, and we have Vicente. And I would like them to introduce themselves, but let me tell you first why we have them here. Today, we're going to speak about responsive organizations. And a responsive organization is an organization that instead of reacting, they anticipate, read the market, and then they are able to change according to the market, depending on how the market is going. But it's a matter of culture, it's a matter of communication, it's a matter of process. It's the entire organization that has to be aligned and connected. And that's the reason how he became friends of Bob Gower, our friend from New York City, who is author and consultant and entrepreneur and teacher as well. And he's an expert in radical alignment, which is actually his new book. We have also Nydia Iglesias, who is analyst, political and economical analyst from Citibanamex, sorry. And she's going to be talking to us about how we can interpret the direction that the government can take, or the different ways and paths that the government can take in the future, and how organizations as large as Citibanamex are willing to go or are deciding to take a path for success. And then we're going to talk also with Vicente Fenoll. And I love Vicente because aside from being a friend of ours, he was a client, in fact. And he's someone that is always 3 steps ahead. He's going to be wearing the entrepreneurship and the startup agenda. He always thinks like an entrepreneur, which is a combination of optimism and risk at the same time, but with a very, very, very strong performance. We have in our team also, let me introduce to you, Karen Senado. We say hello, Karen. Karen is wearing the strategic innovator. Paulina is wearing the culture hat also because, as you know, she's Mexico's Malinche when it comes to culture.
I want to talk a little bit about our sponsors. Our dinner tonight is served by another entrepreneur here in Mexico called Amati. They are specializing in sending people and companies right now experiences. Gourmet experiences. Our second sponsor, and I want to thank Casa Lumbre because they are sending us the first brand of Mexican whiskey. Just imagine us having dinner at home, and this is our home, so welcome. And Karen, I know you have some statistics for us just to jumpstart into the conversation and have some starting point.
The latest drop in Mexico GDP was 18.7% in the second quarter of this year, becoming the worst decline in national economic history. This will undoubtedly increase the 8% estimation of zombie companies in the country. I don't know, Bob, if you use that economic and business term in the US.
I'm not familiar. What do you mean by zombie companies?
It's pretty easy. These are companies that think that they're alive, but they're struggling and they will eventually run out of gas. That's what we call in Mexico zombie companies.
Yeah.
And it's very scary, the statistic here. How do you feel about that, Nydia? What information do you have on your end?
The problem is that for many countries, for most of the world, in fact, particularly the developed economies, this huge impact on the economy that came about as a result of the lockdowns imposed by the pandemics, this impact is being fought back by many actions being taken by the governments. Countries led by populist governments, the actions being taken by their governments, by their political leaders, are either absent or mistaken in terms of what the international experience provides us with as the best practices framework. I will only say one last thing that relates to the numbers you presented us with. While there are countries which have or whose governments have decided with a countercyclical action to support their economic activity, their enterprises in general, and of course their populations, with fiscal aids that amount, in the case of the UK, the fiscal support provided by the government goes up to 16.8% of their GDP. And in the case of the US, the figure goes to 10% of GDP. In our case, Mexico announced early in the lockdown their decision, or the president's decision, to support the situation with a 0.7% of GDP, which, when carefully looked at, because of the sub-registries in expenditure, in national expenditure for this year, it really nets the amount of fiscal support to zero. So we are facing the situation with the decision from our government not to support the economic recovery of most of our firms, to ignore the situation that a large segment of the middle class is facing now, that when they are losing their jobs and losing income in a very varied degree, but in general terms, the picture is quite gloomy for a large segment of the economy and of the population.
But this struggle and this confrontation with a very different reality that we have ever encountered in the history of the world, actually, it's creating an opportunity for organizations to understand that change and conversations are needed within the company, because right now we're fighting on our own. We're going on our own because the government is not helping us. So, Bob, what do you think about, what can you tell us about these difficult conversations that people are having within the organizations?
And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, of course, the difficult conversations that I was working on with most of my clients were layoffs, essentially, right? And there's a part of me, and I'm actually very curious to hear from this group what your opinion is. But there's always been a part of me, in the U.S. especially, right, that we actually have a kind of socialist structure for big companies. Big companies are heavily subsidized, they're bailed out, and we think of employment as the way we take care of people. So the government takes care of the people through the mechanism of the organization, these big organizations, which requires employment. But when I think about the companies that I'm working with, getting lean quickly in times of crisis is extremely, extremely important, right? You have to take, run rate off of your balance sheet very, very quickly. And most companies are bloated in terms of headcount. And so then this creates this very, very difficult anxiety actually inside of me, and a sort of a philosophical anxiety inside of me, because I do believe that people should be taken care of. I do believe that the government should intervene, but I would much rather see the government intervene with things like universal basic income, certainly socialized healthcare, which we don't have in the US, obviously. So taking, and rent forgiveness and all of these kinds of things, so taking care of people directly rather than taking care of the companies, then expecting the companies to take care of the people. I'm inside the companies, and I'm just like, okay, how do we survive this thing? Where can we cut? How can we refocus on our strategy on the essential pieces of the strategy and let the other pieces go? And unfortunately, that means letting people go. And I was really counseling some of my clients early on. You actually have to cut headcount really quickly, because later on, you're not going to be able to be generous with them. You're just not going to have the capital to give them decent payouts. And it's it's a terrible situation on all the way around. So I don't really have a good answer, but those are the conversations that I'm hearing and the conversations I'm having with myself.
You're just mentioning a very interesting term that everyone have been listening to for months, which is the concept of essential. And that's very challenging, because it's not what we thought that was essential. Amazon is not essential at all. And that's one of the big winners of this super crisis. But how about the middle class? How is middle class and the startups reacting to this or responding to this from your point of view, Vicente?
So the world scene is quite difficult to understand, but there is a lot of people that they want to save their money, and have social impact with that. And on the other hand, we have a lot of people that they say, I need money, I want to take a loan. I don't care about the interest rates, but I need the money. So that we are trying to do is to understand how can we balance. At the end, that we found is that it's possible to use mathematical methods, machine learning, and other tools to equilibrate the market. But at the end is that we are trying to understand is that there are thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people that they are worried about the future, that they do not understand what is happening with this crisis. And the crisis is not only economic crisis, it's only the COVID crisis. Today we have a combination of a health crisis with economic crisis. Finance is a mixture of a lot of needs. So the main point for us is how can we understand the people in order to help them to resolve the problems on that.